Hello Year 5 and welcome to your English lesson. So I hope you got on alright with reading your poems that you were looking at yesterday. So today we're going to identify and explore the different key language features of a poem. We're going to specifically look at our pencil poem for today. So our success criteria for this lesson is to be able to identify the key features of a poem. So I'm going to go through and recap a toolkit that I've created based on the activity that you had to do yesterday, where you had to try and come up with all the different features that you noticed between all of the poems that you read. So you're going to need to have that handy with you today so that you can check off that yours is similar to mine. We're going to then be identifying the key language features, which we usually do when we pick apart any piece of writing. So looking at where they've got fronted adverbials, if there's personification, whether we might have rhyme that might be going on in our poem. And then you're going to have a go at identifying the figurative language in a poem, because that's going to be the bulk of what we're going to be looking at for the next few lessons. So you're going to have a go at then picking apart our pencil poem and highlighting where all the key features are on that one as well. So before we do anything, I've got a retrieval activity. So this goes back to the last week's work that we did for our Grendel writing of relative pronouns. So I want you to write these 3 sentences out. And what I'd like to do is, can you fill in the correct missing pronoun for me? So pause the video and have a go. Okay, number 1, so our new teacher, blank, is in charge of PE, is called Miss Nelson. The answer there is who. Our new teacher, who is in charge. Okay, that's relating to the person that we're talking about, which is the teacher. So who. The next one, Fred, pause, car was parked outside, was covered in scratches. Now we're linking to a car and Fred. We know that's a property, so we're looking for a pronoun that relates to it being in the possession of Fred. So that missing one there is whose. Okay, so Fred, whose car was parked outside, was covered in scratches. Now the last one here, the microwave, blank, was warming up some food, caught on fire. So obviously we're describing an object here, so the appropriate one there would be which. The microwave, which was warming up some food, caught on fire. It can't be who. We could say the microwave that was warming up some food caught on fire. I suppose that could make sense as well. But we know it's not going to be whose or which or who or whom on there, because it's not a person. We're not talking about anyone. So well done if you got all 3 of those correct. That's just a little bit of a recap based on what we looked at before we all came home. So this looks like a lot of information. I'm not going to run through all of this. I have sent a copy of this home to you guys as well, so that you've got it and you can have a read through it at your own leisure. But this is what I've come up with for the idea of poems, okay, and the different skills that were across all of those poems. Now, we might not necessarily use all of these skills in our poem, but it was worth having a look to see and identifying the different types of skills that are required. So the first one I got on here was stanzas, which some of you might have been calling them paragraphs, which they are a little bit like paragraphs, but when it's poems, we say that they're broken up into stanzas. They can be of different lengths, they can rhyme, they might have different rhythm to them, and they tend to be groups of lines, a little like paragraphs in prose. So when we talk about paragraphs, where they're a bit chunky with more information, it's a similar thing in poetry, but they tend to be a little bit smaller, and we call them stanzas, okay? And if you looked at the poems, that was the word of poems, which I think I sent home, I can't remember, there were 6 stanzas in that one. It can be any number of lengths for a poem, it could just be 2 lines, maybe 1 stanza. We've then got the rhythm, which is the beat of a poem. So some of the ones I sent home to you, because they tend to have a rhyme in them and they were the same length of their sentences, that's when we had the different rhythm in them. Now, we looked at this when we did our sonnets. We had the heartbeat that went with it, didn't we? Which was the iambic pentameter, which was like the beat of a drum, and it was in sets of 5, so it had 10 beats. So ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Okay, and that was that idea of the beat. So you've got the iamb, okay, which is the 5, and then you've got the pentameter, which was the in-beat in the rhythm, like a heartbeat. So you have the rhythm of a poem, okay? The best way to work out the rhythm of a poem is to read it out loud. The poem that we're going to be looking at particularly today doesn't necessarily have a rhythm to it, but some of them do. This one here, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. You can see there how each line then rolls with each one. Now, rhyme tends to be the one thing that we associate most poems with, it that they rhyme. And you guys know about rhyming couplets, where you've got your A-B pattern, okay, you've got your C-D pattern. So same for over here, you've got wild, tree, smile, and me. Okay, here we've got obviously the full rhyme that goes along at the each ones. We then have rhyming couplets, and rhyming couplets is where it alternates, where you've either got 2 together that sound like rhyming words and they change each time round, or you alternate it between sentence and sentence. We then have alliteration, okay, so there's sparklers scrawling their silver loops and hoops, okay, so we've got the alliteration of the S. Repetition. Repetition is quite a big one. Again, we do a lot of repetition when we've done like our amplification work, when we did the man and the piano, we did our flashback work, we did some of our newspaper report writing for Frances Brandywine. We looked at that repetition of the knock, knock, knock. And then you've got your typical figurative language that's in a lot of these poems. You've got your similes, so similes describing and comparing it to as or like. And then we've got the metaphors. Now, we always know metaphors are always the hardest ones to write because they're not obviously glaring in your face when you're reading them. But a metaphor is the same as similes, but you're rather than comparing it to something as being similar, you're saying it is that object, okay? Now that links in a little bit of the idea of powerful imagery, okay, which might come in handy a little bit when we look at our poem for today. We've then got personification, okay? Brandon, our king of personification, he can tell you exactly what personification means. He can give you loads of examples because he is the personification king. This again builds that imagery of what the image is that's going through the reader's mind at that point in time. We know that's when we give humans, animals, plants, not humans, inanimate objects, where they give them human characteristics. And we are going to watch a clip tomorrow from a movie that some of you might be familiar with to try and build on that idea of personification and anthropomorphism, which is another big word, which some of you know. I think we've done it a little bit before, but I'll recap that one with tomorrow. So that's a big one that we're going to be focusing on in our poems. And then imagery, okay? So it's that idea of appealing to the reader through the language. What is it that you want them to be imagining in their heads? When you're imagining like a pencil being sharpened, obviously they're effectively peeling the skin of a pencil. You want to imagine someone stood there with a sharpener and almost like the pencil crying in tears or screaming out in pain that you can hear because a pencil's being sharpened. Obviously we know a pencil doesn't necessarily have any feelings, it's a pencil. But if we were to imagine that it did have feelings, if you were to be watching that scenario of a pencil being sharpened, but it's effectively like murdering the pencil, aren't you? You're killing it, poor thing, you're skinning it alive. So it's that creating that image that goes in the head, and a lot of that is aided through using our figurative language, okay? So it's going to be a big, big, big focus for this week. So well done if you got some of those skills. If you didn't get some of those skills, you've got them all written on here as well. You might have had some additional ones that you might have found, but that's going to be our general toolkit that we're going to be using for our poetry for the next 2 weeks. So what I want you to do is I've sent this poem home to you. It's a sort of hardish poem because there's some vocab in there that I think a lot of you might not understand. But what I more want to focus on is the idea of how we're going to pick apart this poem. So I want you to have a read of this poem for me and then come back in the next slide. I'm going to show you how I've annotated it. I'm not going to go through it in too much detail in terms of the poem, but the skills that I'm picking up on, I'm going to point out to you because you're then going to have a go at reading the pencil poem and you're going to have a go at highlighting the key skills, which you're all very familiar with anyway. So just pause the video and have a read. Okay, so this is what I've done with the poem then. Okay, so you've got Personal Helicon by Seamus Heaney. He's a very famous poet. When you do GCSE English, you'll know a lot of Seamus Heaney poems by the time you finish your GCSEs in year 11, because believe you me, I know lots of some of his poetry. So I've got my little toolkit down here at the bottom. Okay, I haven't added on some of the other figurative language of the personification because there's not a huge amount that crops up in this one, but there will be in your poem that you have a look at. So if we just have a look and nosy through this poem, let's have a look and see where I've identified the key skills. So just to give you a bit of background information to see if it helps you understand this poem a little bit more. So a helicon was a mythical mountain. Okay, and it's part of the reason why I picked this because we know a lot about our mountain topic already and our rivers. So streams ran down it, which is what gave the inspiration for the idea behind this poem. So a narcissus looking in a pool fed by one of the streams. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the concept of the story and what it is, and then we're going to have a look at where some of the elements have cropped up in it. So here we've got here, as a child, they could not keep me from wells and old pumps with buckets and windlasses. I loved the dark drop, the trapped sky, the smell as waterweed, fungus and dank moss. Now, you've got the idea of the trapped sky. And now we know, because it's an infinite amount of space that we have, we don't know where the sky starts or where the sky ends because space is just that big. It's that idea of actually looking at a reflection. Okay, so we've got the reflection of the water, okay, you've got the sky that's then reflected on it, okay, and that's the idea of trapping it, because it's almost like taking that photographic image from the water of what the sky looks like, okay. So it's actually a very powerful image of the reflection and looking at the sky, but it's also a metaphor because a reflection can't then be imprisoned. You can't put a reflection of something inside bars, inside a prison. So it's that metaphor of the idea of it being trapped. Here we've also got dark and drop, okay, so we've got our alliteration. You've got powerful adjectives here. We've got the dank moss, okay, you've got dank, rotted, rich, the shallow, the fructified. A lot of those words that we've looked at for powerful adjectives, we did a lot through our Grendel writing and our Beowulf writing when we really tried to over-exaggerate the smell of the swamp, the way that he looked, the sounds that you could hear. We've then got some powerful verbs. So I savoured the rich crash when a bucket plummeted down to the end of it. So savoured, so that means to enjoy, to really take it in, not just to go, oh yeah, well, I heard the crash of the bucket on the water. It's I savoured it. So you imagine, I know some of you have seen, imagine like you went to the jungle and you're out in the jungle for a few weeks and you were given one chocolate bar. You would save that, you'd make it last as long as possible and enjoy it for as long as possible because it's the only one that you've got. The idea of plummeted didn't just fall, okay, or drop. Okay, it plummeted. That plummet is the idea of a really heavy weight that suddenly just drops. You cut the cable ties on a lift. I know you guys love the idea of being in a lift and suddenly dying at the bottom of it because you all hated that poem when we looked at that story. It's the idea of that sudden falling, that really quick, sharp, heavy falling of something. We've then got some rhyming here. We've got dry stone ditch and the soft mulch. Now, this is what we call a half rhyme. So it's where it sort of sounds like it rhymes, and obviously it's got both the ch sound that ends on the end. So rather than it being like ditch and mitch or dolch and mulch, you've still got the ch sound, the air that's on the end of it. Got a simile here, like an aquarium. We've got dragged and hovered, again, your powerful verbs. So when you dragged out long roots from the soft mulch, rather than just pull them out or pick them out or weed them out, you've dragged them out. So it's the idea of something being long and laborious, which it says here, long roots. It's going to take a long time to pull something out that's long, so you drag it. It's a really long process. A white face hovered over the bottom, not just looked or peered or sat there, it's hovered. So it's building that idea of the suspense and it's just hanging there. And then we've got a metaphor here. So others had echoes, gave back your own core with a clean new music on it. Oh, skipped a slide. So that idea of new clean music, when you, I don't know if any of you have ever been to a wishing well or you've been into a hall that's been very empty and you've gone in and you've shouted and it echoes back. And sometimes it changes the pitch and the tune of what your voice sounds like because it the vibrations obviously bounce off the objects, and obviously that's what then transports and goes back into your ears and is then processed and it changes the tone of it. So the idea of clean new music is like a song, it's like a repeat and call response. So that one there is a sneaky little metaphor. Now here we've got some full rhymes. So others had echoes, gave back your own call, was scarce and for there out of ferns and tall. Okay. Now we've got tall foxgloves. Okay, we've got I keep skipping the slide. Ferns and foxglove. Foxgloves, they're really tall, thin plants, and they've got what looks like little bells on them, and they hang off the side of them. Then if you've watched any of the Harry Potter movies, I want to say it's the fourth or the fifth one, where they're on the train, and a Dementor comes along, and you see everything freeze as it comes past when the train stops. And there are some foxgloves there. They look like bells that hang on like a vertical plant. So obviously got a bit of alliteration there, and a rat slapped across my reflection. Okay, so you've got powerful verbs there. If anything, I'd say that's some alliteration that we've got in there because rats don't slap. Although they have hands, well, they don't have hands, they have claws. The idea of a rat slapped across my reflection, it's not actually slapping you, but because it's walking across that water, it's breaking up that reflection, isn't it? So it's the idea of slapping or hitting that reflection, it's breaking it up. Now, to pry into roots, to finger slime, to stare big-eyed Narcissus into some spring. Again, you've got the pry, okay, you've got your powerful verb, and you've got your alliteration. Stare into some spring. Now, spring isn't here referred to in terms of like the autumn or the winter or the summer, but a spring in terms of almost like a river, the water, okay, that crops up. So what I want you guys to have a go at doing now is I want you to do a similar thing to our pencil poem. Now, this pencil poem is a lot easier to understand. I appreciate that was a slightly more challenging one to have a look at. But I want you to see if you can identify whether it's alliteration, a simile, personification, powerful verbs, adjectives, imagery, and expanded noun phrases. Imagery is that's one where it's going to make you think of something in your head. So I want you to have a read through it, create yourself a toolkit, and I want you to see if you can find any examples. If you can't print this, don't have any coloured pencils, write alliteration, and just copy down examples from the poem next to each one of those toolkits, all right? And make sure you do that and you keep that ready for our lesson next week. All right, good luck.